One of the biggest handbrakes on progress in business is poor communication. On the flip side, organisations with great communication are better run, more effective, and typically grow a lot faster. So if you take a step back and examine all the problems within your business over the past week, how many of them could be put down to poor communication? More than likely, a good proportion. That something fell through the cracks, was lost in translation, or just plain wasn't communicated at all. Perhaps your communication is effective, but it's just not efficient. So it's not so much the quality, but just dealing with the volume of communication required. There's so much time wasted. Did you know that the average worker spends 28% of their work week on email? That's a day and a half every week. Is that the best use of their time? I don't think so. Another interesting statistic is that in 1 out of every 3 cases, poor communication is reported as the primary cause or the primary driver of failing to deliver on a project. So if you want to improve your business, invest the effort into improving your communication. And if you want to improve communication within your business, here are the 3 areas that you need to understand and focus on, and that's channels, relevance, and technique. So channels are the means of communication. Getting your communication right means getting your channels right. And in the business environment today, we communicate in a multitude of different ways. So face-to-face, email, text message, team meetings, instant message, social media messaging, help desks, telephone, of course, the list goes on. And so the first thing that you need to examine is the channels of communication being used in your business. Are you using the right channels and are they effective? So the most common mistakes are an over-reliance on email and using too many different platforms. So the default communication option, of course, is email. With the average number of emails sent and received each day somewhere around the 160 mark, that's no wonder. But whilst email still holds great value, there's often huge productivity gains to be had by using it in a smarter way. Remember that on average, most people spend somewhere around a day and a half every week on emails. And how would your business go if you could cut that in half? So one of the most effective strategies you can use to improve business communication is to remove or at least reduce internal email by replacing it with a messaging platform instead, such as Skype or Slack or Microsoft Teams. There's a myriad of options and many of them are actually free. So for internal communication, a messaging app has many benefits over internal emails. And then sometimes you'll find email getting used when some other channel would be much more effective. Perhaps a phone call or speaking to a colleague directly, scheduling a quick meeting. There's nothing quite so frustrating as an internal email chain with 15 people copied in that keeps going for hours or days when a 5-minute discussion would have just settled the issue. And then if your business gets a lot of support queries from customers via email, you could consider setting up a help desk platform as a separate channel to handle this effectively. So the other common problem is too many channels being used. For instance, your sales team has a group chat on WhatsApp, but the management team are using BlackBerry Messenger, whilst random individuals are using Skype. And this is highly ineffective. So pick a channel and stick with it. And the point with channels is to choose which ones you're going to use and how. So the second aspect of good communication to consider is relevance. So is the communication itself relevant? Is it actually required? And then is it going to the right people? So there's a lot to be gained by examining what's happening on the communication front within your business. How much of your communication is actually unnecessary, particularly with email? Even simple things like replying to an email with a thank you. Sometimes it may be courteous, but mostly it's just not needed. And then how many email newsletters and generic junk do you or your team get every day that just isn't relevant to your business? Simple solution, unsubscribe. And be drastic about it, they're just wasting your time. How many times are members of your team are being included in communication when it isn't relevant to them? How many times have you been CC'd into an email that wasn't relevant to you or to your role? Then you're stuck with the whole reply all email chain for the next 3 days. Then there's meetings. So are there team members being included in meetings that they just shouldn't be at? Maybe there's meetings happening which just aren't relevant, full stop. So working hard to keep all communication relevant means that you lower the overall communication workload and therefore become much more focused and efficient at dealing with it. So the final aspect of communication is technique. And this is perhaps the most difficult to address, but there's so much potential if you get it right. Because the way in which you use your communication channels, the techniques and methods and boundaries you set, will dictate how effective and efficient your communication is. So technique is firstly about setting expectations and boundaries. So what are your communication protocols? Which platforms and channels are to be used and which ones not? What channels get used for particular types of communication? To set some team expectations about relevance. Maybe the team just needs to know what is expected. See, sometimes people tend to communicate excessively because they fear something falling through the cracks. But over-communication can be just as ineffective as under-communication. So then you need to make sure that your team has the skills and techniques and knowledge to communicate effectively. So training your team on communication skills could be some of the best training dollars that you've ever spent. Perhaps even some internal training on particular platforms. Do some team training on email and inbox management, how to run effective meetings. Maybe it's another internal communication platform. Do all the team know the best way to use it, all the tips and tricks to get the most out of it? So make the time and effort to give your team the skills to communicate effectively. So that's it. 3 areas to think about in order to improve your communication: channels, relevance and technique. And have a think about the communication that happens within your business. Perhaps you haven't considered it a real issue before, but it's likely an area that holds a lot of potential improvement. And if you use the right channels to communicate relevant information using the best techniques, your communication will be efficient, it will be effective, and your productivity will increase dramatically.